A reading before the sermon. This is We Were Made for These Times by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. Beloveds, do not lose heart. We were made for these times. I have heard from so many recently who are deeply and properly bewildered. They are concerned about the state of affairs in our world now. Ours is a time of almost daily astonishment and often righteous rage over the latest degradations of what matters to most civilized, visionary people. You are right in your assessments. The luster and hubris some have aspired to while endorsing acts so heinous against children, elders, everyday people, the poor, the unguarded, the helpless, is breathtaking. Yet I urge you, ask you, gentle you, to please not spend your spirit dry by bewailing these difficult times. Especially, do not lose hope. Most particularly because the fact is, we were made for these times. Yes, for years we have been learning, practicing, been in training for, and just waiting to meet on this exact plane of engagement. She continues, I grew up on the Great Lakes and recognize a seaworthy vessel when I see one. Regarding awakened souls, there have never been more able vessels in the waters than there are right now across the world. And they are fully provisioned and able to signal one another as never before in the history of humankind. Look out over the prow. There are millions of boats of righteous souls on the water with you. Even though your veneers may shiver from every wave in this stormy royal, I assure you that the long timbers composing your prow and rudder come from a greater forest. The long-grained lumber is known to withstand storms, to hold together, to hold its own, and to advance regardless. In any dark time, there is a tendency to veer toward fainting over how much is wrong or unmended in this world. Do not focus on that. There is a tendency, too, to fall into being weakened by dwelling on what is outside your reach, by what cannot yet be. Do not focus there. That is spending the wind without raising the sails. Ours is not the task of fixing the entire world all at once, but of stretching out to mend the part of the world that is within our reach. Any small, calm thing that one soul can do to help another soul, to assist some portion of this poor, suffering world, will help immensely. It is not given to us to know which acts or by whom will cause the critical mass to tip toward an enduring good. What is needed for dramatic change is an accumulation of acts, adding to, adding more, continuing. We know that it does not take everyone on earth to bring justice and peace, but only a small, determined group who will not give up during the first, second, or 100th gale. There will always be times when you feel discouraged. I too have felt despair many times in my life, but I do not keep a chair for it. I will not entertain it. It is not allowed to eat from my plate. The reason is this: in my uttermost bones, I know something as you do. It is that there can be no despair when you remember why you came to earth, who you serve, and who sent you here. The good words we say and the good deeds we do are not ours. They are the words and deeds of the one who brought us here. In that spirit, I hope you will write this on your wall. When a great ship is in harbor and moored, it is safe. There can be no doubt. But that is not what great ships are built for. Purim is coming Thursday night and Friday during the day. It's a holiday that Jewish people love celebrating. Some say that while Yom Kippur is the holiest day of the Jewish year, Purim is the happiest and probably the most fun. For an outsider, Purim probably seems a bit like Halloween or Carnival, a time of drinking. There's actually a charge to drink until drunk. Costumes and cross-dressing, while men are encouraged to dress as women. It's a holiday of reveling, social upheaval, and role reversals. And so not only do people dress as another gender, but may dress as a different class or some other difference, or as characters from the story. Purim plays have become common. While adults exchange gifts, especially food, as is mandated in the text, as well as making donations to the poor, the holiday is usually associated with children. Some children dress up and collect candy. There are special sweets that day, and lots of kiddo-friendly activities. Fun fact, the book of Esther is one of 2 books in the Hebrew Bible that does not mention God explicitly even once. The other is Song of Songs. I know we've got trivia nerds here. Also, the book does not talk about Jewish laws or covenant, contains no prayers, and it's only one of 2 books that take its name from the leading female character. The other is the book of Ruth. It's a short book and tells one story fairly quickly. It emphasizes human action and is surprisingly thin on commentary, even for the scriptures. It appears to have been written by a Jew in the diaspora and written for other Jews in the diaspora. And it's kind of biblical fanfic, or like a novella, or even a courtier tale. It has no pretenses of historical accuracy, focusing instead on character development and storytelling. Scholars believe that one of the book's purposes is to help Jews in the diaspora navigate the particular challenges for Jews living in non-Jewish places, where they were often marginalized and oppressed. This book illustrates understanding power, interrelational dynamics, and liberation. The story is unusual, and at times the narrative is sparse in explanation. The story takes place in Persia's capital almost 2,500 years ago, if historians are correct in their identification. We are first introduced to the king, Ahasuerus, who is the ruler of the Persian Empire. He holds a 180-day banquet for his court and dignitaries, followed by a 7-day banquet for all the inhabitants of the capital city. On the final day of that banquet, Ahasuerus, very drunk, orders his wife, the Queen Vashti, to display her beauty to the guests by coming before them wearing her crown. That is, naked. In response, she declines. She declines this invitation. And in response, the king banishes her from the kingdom and, on advice from his counselors, even decreed that women must obey their husbands. After a while, the king realizes that he's lonely, and maybe firing his wife was a horrible idea. So then, depending on the translation, the king decides to gather all the virgins of the kingdom to evaluate them as prospective new queens. Some translations refer to him having a beauty pageant, some a harem, and there's no judgment in the text about this. One of the women is Esther, a Jewish female orphan. And this combination makes her among those with the least amount of power in Persian society. Her guardian / uncle / cousin person, the relationship isn't entirely clear, is a person named Mordecai. He's part of the king's court and, as her guardian, is concerned about her. He tells her she must not tell anyone that she is Jewish, and she follows his advice. Given her options, Esther seems intent on making the most of this whole thing. So when Esther has her chance with the king, she wins him over with her beauty and character, and he decides to make her his queen. Esther is really sharp and quickly learns about the dynamics of court life. When Mordecai learns of a plot to kill the king, he tells Esther, who tells the king, and further solidifies their favor with him. A little later, the king decides that he needs a new advisor and appoints this guy named Haman. So Haman is the worst. And anytime his name is mentioned, people in the audience boo, stomp their feet, and shake noisemakers. So you are welcome to participate in this practice if you'd like. He seems to be kind of full of himself and requires everyone to kneel before him. For unknown reasons, although I think we can probably guess why, Mordecai refuses, and in retaliation, Haman decides to advise the king to kill all the Jews. Also, for unknown reasons, the king says, sure. I mean, they're all anti-Semitic, but this is pretty extreme. So Mordecai finds out about this and knows it's his fault. But no one knows that Esther, the queen, is Jewish. Mordecai tells her she must now tell the king and convince him not to kill the Jews. Esther is afraid, like to her core afraid. She's among the most marginalized of people and from the most oppressed of situations. She's young and has been taken from her people. And while she's been doing this super great job of working the system so far, is she up to this? And worse, the king made up this rule at some point that no one can come before him without his invitation, or they will be executed. So Esther doesn't know what to do. It's an impossible situation with the risk of death for Esther either way. And what if she tries and fails? The stakes are really high, about as high as they can get. Maybe because the stakes are so high, it's worth taking the risk? What would you do? Bishop Marion Edgar Buddy of Have Mercy sermon fame on the day of the current president's inauguration wrote a book published a couple of years ago titled How We Learn to Be Brave, Decisive Moments in Life and Faith. It is predictably thoughtful and wonderful. In the book, she breaks down the journey of learning to be brave into 7 chapters that reflect the 7 ways of practice. Practice is a vital part of the learning, of course, but discernment is too. Buddy's categories are deciding to go, deciding to stay, deciding to start, accepting what you do not choose, stepping up to the plate, the inevitable letdown, and the hidden virtue of perseverance. All the names are transparent for what they mean for the journey. Sometimes we discern that we should go, as I did when I left Ohio for Pennsylvania and Pennsylvania for Florida. Sometimes our discernment is that we should stay, as it was for me in Tarpon Springs each year I served that congregation. Deciding to start is how we begin any long-term project where the way is unclear. Stepping up to the plate is taking our place when we're supposed to. The inevitable letdown is the failures that come along the way, sometimes immediately after doing the big and great thing and starting to think we're a little invincible. And the hidden virtue of perseverance, which I've never experienced as hidden myself, is very important to us in making it through anything that we hope to achieve. And accepting what you do not choose. In my experience, that could easily be its own book. Coming on the heels of last week's service, I now know a little more about how many of you are trying to accept what you have not chosen, as we all do at times in life. While I won't mention any of the things that you were trying to let go of for this year at Lent, I will say many of them were repeated amongst you. And between the 2 congregations, I believe just about every item shared was being held by someone else as well. Like Esther, I am sure there have been multiple times in your own lives when you wish that you'd not been given some experience to go through. I know there have been in mine, and in my work as a chaplain and as a minister, I have witnessed many more. But this is how life works. Things happen, and all we can do is choose how to respond. Again, Esther is young, and undoubtedly as an orphan, a Jew, and a girl, and now ostensibly a woman, she has had to make hard choices in her own life before this. So back to the story. Mordecai tells Esther, "Do not think that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silence at such a time as this, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another quarter, but you and your your father's family will perish. Who knows? Perhaps you have come to royal dignity for just such a time as this." Esther takes some time to reflect, but knows that she must act soon. In the fall, I did a bit of a deep dive into the life of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and at a critical point, Bonhoeffer is offered a position and returned to the US, but instead he chooses the deciding to stay route. Like Esther, I believe, he explains, "I will have no right to participate in the reconstruction of Christian life in Germany after the war if I do not share in the trials of this time with my people." I believe Esther might have felt similarly about her relationship with her people. But he writes, "Accepting what we do not choose and cannot change is one of the most courageous decisions we make and the most difficult. But we generally don't get to acceptance until we've exhausted all other options." So Esther develops a plan. She does not keep a chair for despair, will not entertain it, will not allow it to eat from her plate. She invites the king and Haman to a feast. The king offers to grant any request that she has, up to half of his kingdom. They come to dinner, and she stokes their egos and gets them feeling good and puts her in good graces with both men. So then Esther has another dinner party, this time a banquet, the next evening. When the time comes, she asks for her life and those of her people, that those they be granted. That is her request. A little later, Esther secures the fate of the Jews by seeing to it that Haman is executed. And to honor this victory, a celebration is held that becomes the festival of Purim. Jews are commanded to get so drunk that they cannot distinguish between the good of Mordecai and the evils of Haman, as a reminder that good and evil live everywhere, and we don't know how they will manifest. The costumes represent the second dinner party that Esther hosts. Men are encouraged to dress like women in recognition of and celebrating Esther's wisdom, strength, and power, and her rise from oppression that saves her people. Now, Esther is clearly the hero of this story, and going back to the story I told earlier, Tomorrow I'll Be Brave, I almost decided not to use it. That book talks about how the main character is not alone in their striving, and I kept thinking, but Esther acts alone, which is true, as is the fact that she too is not alone. If no one else, she has Mordecai. I assume, rightfully or not as well, that Esther also has others in the palace who she talks with as she works out what must be done. And more, even if she's not communicating with them directly, she has all of the Jewish people in Persia alongside her as she strategizes. Like any great leader, Esther is not alone. Mordecai is taking his own risks by not bowing before Haman. Does this kind of remind you of a parallel situation happening at this moment these days? And while he could be blamed for creating this mess that Esther needs to resolve, we can't really blame him for what he has done. He has acted with integrity. In its way, Mordecai's act sets an example for Esther, although one that they are hoping has a different outcome. And as it is sometimes, I then remembered my ordination service. My best friend and colleague, Reverend Julian Soto, preached in part on Esther and her fight for her people. Reverend Soto said that I was made for such a time as this, as we are all made for such a time. The question is only whether we will rise to meet it. It is rare to be in such an extraordinary position that one person alone can have such a profound impact like Esther did. It is almost always all of us working together who do. As Estes noted in our reading, ours is not the task of fixing the entire world at once, but of stretching out to mend the part of the world that is within our reach. Any small, calm thing that one soul can do to help another soul, to assist some portion of this poor, suffering world, will help immensely. It is not given to us to know which acts or by whom will cause the critical mass to tip toward an enduring good. What is needed for dramatic change is an accumulation of acts, adding to, adding more, continuing. We know that it does not take everyone on earth to bring justice and peace, but only a small, determined group who will not give up during the first, second, or 100th gale. There will always be times when you feel discouraged. I too have felt despair many times in my life, but I do not keep a chair for it. I will not entertain it. It is not allowed to eat from my plate. In that spirit, I hope that you will write this on your wall. When a great ship is in harbor and moored, it is safe, there can be no doubt. But that is not what great ships are built for. As much as any of us might want to walk away, Buddy once told her colleagues, this is our time. We did not choose the circumstances in which we find ourselves. All we can do is decide how we will respond. Love is asking great things of us in this time. May we all be willing to accept what we did not choose and accept its call.